Hi, I'm Neil McCormick. Welcome to The Bridge podcast, Music, War and Peace, where we talk to singers and songwriters and artists about the power of music to affect change in the world. And I'm delighted to be able to dive right in at the deep end with a man who has done just that. A singer and songwriter, incredible frontman for Ireland's greatest punk heroes, the Boomtown Rats, and the pop activist who gave us Band Aid and Live Aid and put charity and political change right
he's embarrassed
into the centre.
He's embarrassed saying this because we know each other very well for a long time.
Put it in the centre of the pop world. Well, you know, you were a hero to me when I was a young man, Bob.
Not that much younger, McCormick. Not
much,
that,
and I was much younger than you. And you've remained a pretty persistent agitator for causes that you believe in.
Yep.
Even though secretly or not so secretly, I think your favourite cause is rock and roll. So, Sir Bob Geldof, no better man to talk to on this subject because you've been there and you've done it. We all know the story of how you saw terrible scenes of famine in Ethiopia on TV in 1984 and were moved to do whatever you could about it.
Yeah.
And what you could do was write a song and get other famous people to sing it. And it's not that there'd never been a charity record or a charity concert before, but the way you went about it pushed it to a whole new level, not seen before. But it started with the song, Do They Know It's Christmas? What made you believe a song could have that kind of positive impact?
Well, part of what you said that, you know, maybe the strongest thing I believe in is rock and roll. And, you know, kind of pathetic as that is, that's absolutely true, because that was the only thing that seemed reasonable to me as a child, or plausible. And the boys and girls of that generation, I think, were the first time, certainly a teenager would have heard their own thoughts articulated so well. So, you know, John and Paul, Mick and Keith, Bob and Pete. And that was a period when they talked about, when everything seemed static to me and probably your generation in Ireland, when everything seemed impossible to change, and yet change everywhere was happening. They talked about other possibilities, other universes, demanding that change was possible. And that here was the rhetoric of change in what they were saying, but also here was the platform of change itself, which was rock and roll. So that was what I imbibed and clung on to feverishly as sort of my life sort of unwound into not a very good place. So when a certain period came in time, the 1980s, when Margaret Thatcher was in power in Britain and Ronald Reagan in America, there was an idea that Thatcher articulated, saying there's no such thing as society. She did contextualise about what's gone down in history because it speaks to the caricature of the woman, and her policies was there's no such thing as society, which I rejected out of hand. And that really encapsulates the idea of what was happening in the mid-80s. So when, as you suggested, when the Boomtown Rats started in Ireland, we came at a time when inflation was 27% in the United Kingdom. I mean, we complain about it now, but 27%. Ireland had a zero economy. It offered its young people nothing at all. And New York was declared bankrupt. And the American president told New York, quite literally on the television, to go to hell. So it's not weird that you get the Sex Pistols saying there is no future in England's dreaming, which is brilliant, actually. It's not weird that you get the Ramones, this ironic, what else can you be in the world's greatest city and it's bankrupt? It's a pure irony. And it's not weird that you get a bunch of kids in South Dublin who just have had it, just had enough. They don't know really what they're doing or what they want to say or anything, but again, pop seemed to be the vehicle for saying it, or certainly getting out of that situation. So we were part of that in a kind of off to the side sense. And when it came around in the 1980s that this was the sort of the new economy and the new gestalt, if you like, there was a feeling that that wasn't right. Music had changed. There were a whole new bunch of bands, new ways of saying things, new ways of looking. Thatcher's children, really. But really, if punk was the beauty of ugliness, then by the 80s, with all their My Name is Rio and the yachts and the girls and the great Anthony Price suits and the pink hair and all that. So if punk was the beauty of ugliness, then by the mid-1980s you were talking about the ugliness of beauty. So you need to understand where I came from in a rock and roll sense, a sense of rock and roll ejectionism. And I saw the BBC report on the greatest famine of the 20th century taking place in Ethiopia and Africa. And my own headspace was quite down at the time. It's a down part of the year, late October in the UK. So my response to it, and also I just had my first daughter. And so all these things are in my head. So I was the perfect mark to see this hideous imagery of children dying and parents in despair. Great dignity, but what next? So my band had been 10 years going. We had a clutch of hits under our belt. These new guys had arrived. And I just thought, this can't stand. And I had a history of that in my previous life of being a part of and organising a march in Dublin at 13 with anti-apartheid, been part of CND, working with the homeless in Dublin, coming at a political time in rock music. The Rat songs were in effect largely political, whether it was I Don't Like Mondays or Rat Trap, or even looking after number one as kind of, pre-Thatcher, but about what was coming. So all I could do in the face of this was immediately react in the only way I knew how. But we needed to use the kids who are now making the running. I knew them from Top of the Pops and the Go-Go rock and roll show of the 80s, The Tube. My missus, my partner, was the co-host of that with Jules Holland. So I thought, well, if I do it, it's not guaranteed to be a hit any longer. After 10 years, it used to be automatically a Boomtown Rats track would be a hit. That wasn't so. And so I thought I'll get all the guys making the running now. And I knew them. Many of them were friends. I was excited by what they were doing. So when I rang, it wasn't as if it was some doofus just ringing up. They'd grown up with the Rats, they were at least 10 years younger. So some of them were kind of flattered, weird. Some of them just said, yeah, absolutely, we saw it. Others were exactly my generation, Sting. But largely the bands of 76 had all dissolved or reinvented themselves in other iterations like Paul Weller, or just blasted apart like the Clash. So we were the last band standing, but I still, great friends with Sting. He's literally 3 days older than me. Friends at that point with George Michael and Gary Kemp and these people. So it wasn't difficult to ring them. But when I did ring the Tube and my missus, she said, well, Midge is here from Ultravox, very similar past to me, Thin Lizzy, a power pop sort of band, and now he'd morphed into sub-Bowie Ultravox, and he was number 2 in the charts. So he hadn't seen it, but kindred spirits, two Celts sort of thing, and he just said, well, what have you got in mind? And I said, well, we have to get it done by Christmas. And those outside the UK don't really understand the cultural signifier that a number 1 Christmas record is here. It doesn't work other countries. But here it's a big thing. And mainly because that's where the most sales annually are. And so I just thought, we'll do what we can. We've only got a few weeks before Christmas. If we get to number one, we'll get £100,000. We'll give it to one of the charities. And that's the most I or we could do. So Midge said, yeah, right, what do you want to do? And I said, well, something, some Dylan song we all know. And he said, no, let's write something. Right. So I thought, okay, it was certainly a mark of confidence. He just saw me as another songwriter, didn't. And I had a song that the Rats had rejected called It's My World. And they'd gone, no, that's a bit shit. And I said, okay, here we go. I hate playing songs to the band. I sort of mumbled them and they go, what? What's that chord? Again, same thing, we done that. It's awful. The words were, it's my world and there's no need to be afraid. And I just said, it's Christmas time and there's no need to be afraid. And I was off then and I wrote it down straight away. Midge had do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Got together, we did it. He pulled in all the people I'd spoken to. They came around, Weller, Sting, John Taylor from Duran. I did the video and it's insane what happens. I mean, it's insane. And of course, because I've answered the question and thought about it for 40 years precisely, why? Why did that happen? And the why is, of course, monomedia. There were only 2 channels, and the BBC were absolute verity. That's where you went for the facts. And it goes to actually a contemporary argument about the value of journalism. Without Michael Burke stumbling upon, this biblical famine, and he stumbled upon it. He was there to report on this 20-year civil war. That was a proper war, tanks and planes, which ultimately bombed and strafed all the Band-Aid trucks and killed our drivers, etc., etc. Proper war. He stumbled upon these people in a field in Coram. So had it not been for that, and the fact that everyone at tea time watched the 6 o'clock news, I didn't think about that, but everyone was ashamed and angry and horrified by what they saw, and it was the force of Burke's reporting and Mo Amin's camera work that made you see, smell, feel and hear what he was saying. And so with frustration, nobody knew how to respond. I had a guitar, I could respond. And so that Christmas, this record becomes the focus of that rage and shame. And that seemed to translate everywhere around the world.
How important do you think it is that it was a good song? Would any song have done?
Yeah. And I made that clear at the very, we mixed it. I stayed up all night. I was arguing with the Musicians Union, with Robert Maxwell of The Mirror, with everyone at 3 a.m. And at 5 I brought it home and stayed up until the early morning show on BBC One, and I went in and I wasn't sure if it was any good. It certainly sounded better than what I thought. Midge had made it. Midge Ure had really made this. It's a fantastic production, Neil. It really is. I mean, even now, like when I'm in Tesco's at Christmas, doom, 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 doom. I mean, it's so good. It's so minimal. And that terrible clang. I mean, he was responding to the lyric, the clanging chimes of doom, but he found the clang that was in my gut. I mean, like I just had, but it's only now, objectively, that I can hear it as a track. But Midge's, what he did was take an okay song and elevate it to being a proper record. That's key. But at the time, I said on the radio, it doesn't matter if you don't like Boy George. It doesn't matter if you hate George Michael. It doesn't, it doesn't matter if you hate the song. Just buy it. It's a signifier. I keep saying it, it's a small instrument for change. It always was, and it remains so. And people took that to heart. They didn't give a crap. Like even the coolest, whatever the cool band of the mid-80s was, people went out famously and bought 40 and handed 39 back because the pressing plants in Europe, all Europe, couldn't press enough fast enough. So people just hand back 39 or give them to, like, I don't want this fucking thing. There you go. And they'd give it to each other. So it did become this thing that went way outside of what we had predicted. So millions of pounds later, you then say, well, now what? And the phone rings and it's Harry Belafonte. And Harry Belafonte was a hero of mine. I mean, I totally associated him with Woody Guthrie and with From Which the Rats Got Their Name and all this stuff. And people forget he was the first black man to have a network series on mainstream American TV because he was so beautiful. But not only that, he took slave songs from the islands and put them at number one in the charts. Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight's come. I want to go home. Count the fucking bananas, and let me go home. Like, and just amazing. He funded Martin Luther King as a young pastor. He brought Frank Sinatra down to the South and said, this is why your musicians can't stay in the same hotel. And Frank wouldn't play anymore unless they stayed in the same hotel. So this guy's a pistol. So he rings up and he goes, that Bob Geldof? I said, yeah. He goes, this is Harry Belafonte. I go, fucking hell, I'm trying to watch Dynasty, Harry, or something. And he goes, we're ashamed of what you Brit kids did. I said, I'm Irish, actually, Harry. And he goes, same fucking thing. So much for the Marxist dialectic then, Belafonte, And he said, we want to do the same. Will you come over? And obviously he didn't need me, but it was flattering. And I said, well, yeah, why? And he said, you've just come back. And he said, I want to tell all the guys in the studio why we're there. Lionel and Michael are writing a song. Quincy's going to this was blowing my head off, hello. I mean, it's one thing hanging with Duran Duran. It's quite another, hanging with Quincy Jones and Willie Nelson sort of thing. And he said, Michael's here. Hi, Bob. I'm going. So my missus is going nuts. I'm going to Michael Jackson. So I go to USA for Africa, and they're all up from an awards ceremony. They're all looking great, but basically, it's my bedroom wall has come alive in front of me. Quite literally, it is the culture of the Western world in person there. 3 yards from my face, So I'm looking at Willie Nelson, I'm looking at Ray Charles, I'm looking at Smokey Robinson, for God's sake, Paul Simon, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, Michael Jackson, and it went on and on. So it was very different to Band Aid, I have to tell you. These Herberts coming in with crap haircuts and stuff, and like just out of school essentially. And but those two, Band Aid alerting everyone, the Americans picking it up, this turns America on and 32 million others around the world. So now it's game on.
I wanted to put this in the song term, right? Yeah. You said it didn't matter what the song was, but there were a couple of big songs that have stayed in the We Are the World and Let It
Ours is better.
Yeah, I know you think so, and actually I don't disagree. Yours has that very dark line, thank God it's them instead of you. And that darkness, that dark and ironic and satiric approach to the world is pervasive in your work. It's unusual in a song that's kind of saying, well, the American song is all we are the world, we are the children, we love everything, which is what you might expect from that kind of anthem, whereas yours has the darkness. And that's how you write. Mm-hmm. Now, you wrote a song, the great song of Indifference. Yeah. And that is a powerful protest anthem about the indifference of the world, except it's a sing-along song which is actually saying, I don't give a fuck about you or anything, the third world. And you have to have an ironic understanding in order to appreciate it. How does that kind of song work in the world? Do people take it seriously? Do you think everybody gets it? I
don't think they get it. I don't think they have to get it. They think it's... that song in particular is recorded in 18 separate languages. Not just it came out in 18 countries. That wouldn't be that extraordinary. and they send me the lyrics. I say, fine, but can you send me what you're actually singing? The Bulgarian one sounds like the Volga boatmen have just come ashore again, you know. But they utilise it, so they seem to get it. They utilise it for whatever's going on in their country. And I'm dismayed by it and happy it happened, of course, because that was never the intent. The song I made up on the spot. As you know, I'm Irish. And, you know, traditional music anywhere is a pain in the arse as far as I'm concerned, you know. So I pay lip service to, yes, it's wonderful, but if I hear another scratching fiddle, I'll go ballistic, you know. And I get it, I know the vibe, but, you know, I like the blues, and I kind of stopped there really with that sort of thing. I'm obsessed by that music. But so I was noodling on the guitar in the studio. All the band were there. We were waiting for a take on, you know, a song that we knew. And I just played this simple riff that must have been done a million times. And I started singing. And I'm not sure if it's on the track, but certainly on the tape it says, "Are you still rolling?" And obviously you don't hear the response, but it is. So I
it is on the
Oh,
track,
is it? Okay. And I say, and I just sing any old stuff, because I just like this. I go, I don't mind if you go, I don't mind. And, you know, it's fairly standard stuff, but then it turns out it's not incoherent. And gradually it starts becoming something. And it's like your subconscious has caught up with your foreconscious as the song progresses, and it knows what it's meant to be about. This sounds like, oh, the mystery of writing songs. No, not at all, but this is literally what happened. And so any words you hear on it were literally made up at that moment on the spot. I play the guitar upside down and backwards because I'm left-handed, but I play a normal guitar. So Pete, the bass player in the Rats and in the solo band for 40 years, my mate, he calls out the chords I'm playing because he can read them upside down and backwards. So he was just mouthing to the others what the chords are, and they're very simple. So once they had it, and they just picked up on it. And at the end, it goes into a sort of Irishy jig thing, and I start laughing because that's the last thing I ever want to play, to be honest with you. But and we laughed, and I said, let's listen back to it. And I listened back and I went, oh, that's coherent. So it was unthought through. So possibly to your point, it's where I go to normally and naturally. It's not something. And irony is a way of making, an easier way of making a point that would be less well received if you were didactic, I think. So you can say, I don't care if the third world fries. It's hotter there. I'm not surprised. I can watch whole nations die. I don't care. You know, but go back to the first line you ever heard from Bob Geldof or the Boomtown Rats. The world owes me a living. That's the first thing anyone heard. You know, it's very good because it's of its time. The same year you heard, I'm the Antichrist. You know, that's the opening line from Johnny. He laid his cards. Or Joe Strummer, what's it? White Riot. I want a riot of my own. So the Rats say, the world owes me a living, you know. I don't want to be like you. I don't want to think like you. I'm going to be like me. You know, I'd step on, I'd step on your face or my mother's grave, you know. My mother was dead, obviously, you know, so I guess that's it. So a lot of it is ironic, but I'm not thinking, that's ironic. I'm not thinking that. Those sort of lines occur to me. I get whacked by critics who know exactly very well what I'm saying and talking about and why. For example, on Do They Know It's Christmas? They understand exactly where I'm coming from and what I mean by it. And so I get, you know, the faux critique. But again, I think, and also, and forgive me if this sounds thing, I loved Woody Guthrie's songs. I loved Dylan's songs, who didn't? But Dylan's ironic talking songs, you know, the payoff line, or Cadillac's a good car to drive after a war. I think I said that, or whatever it is, you know, the Abraham Lincoln thing he does. All those sort of things I loved. And also in the blues, you know, you get a lot of it. So that was my background. I'm not a cynic, but I am very skeptical. Cynicism is a very narrow, thin road to indifference, really. You know, and I'd sooner chase the hounds of action rather than the hares of indifference, you know.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about perhaps a favourite peace anthem, a favourite anthem of this. But actually, I noticed that you have performed one that we all know, which has also got more than a tinge of irony, which is the Nick Lowe song.
Oh, that's
what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding.
Everyone knows it, I think, but it's so unrecognised as one of the perfect No songs, you know. I mean, because he's taken the ironic air quotes, "Hey, peace and love, man," and then, you know, in your dotage, like us, you kind of go, what is so funny about peace, love, and understanding? What? I don't get it. Why is everyone being ironic or invert? Why can't you say on radio in the UK, certainly, why can't you say love as a DJ without going love? Like, you know, old, what's his name? Who's it? Not Barry Manilow. Who's it? Isaac Casey type guy. What's his name? Barry White. You know, love. Like, why can't you just say love? In my world, the single most important word of the human soul. You know, life without love is utterly meaningless. It actually is. And, you know, I kind of came to that realization only when love was withdrawn from me. And then life wasn't worth living. So you understand the profundity of the necessity of love for us. So what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding is a seriously great question. To actually just put somebody with a straight face, well, what's the objection to that? Well, Bob, so no, seriously, you're objecting to understanding. And then, if you do, you're a twat. So it's very simple. And then he goes through it as I walk through this wicked world, searching for light in this darkness and misery. I ask myself, is all hope gone? Is there only pain and whatever it is and misery? And each time I feel like this inside, you know, there's one thing I want to know: what's so funny about peace? It's so simple, you know. And of course the music is so good with it, but it's kind of irrelevant. I mean, I've done it on telly, and in case people miss the seriousness of how good this song is, I do the lyrics. And I another friend of mine in Ireland, the guy who started the hot press and owns it, Niall Stokes, who tried to keep the flame of rock and roll burning through those dark show band chill nights.
Keeping Ireland safe for rock and roll was their slogan.
He had a thing on St. Bridget's Day. I'd never heard of St. Bridget, but apparently she's been elevated to a patron saint of the Holy Isle along with Patrick. And he does a thing every year around Women's Day, and he does a series of gigs which are all the great girl artists in Ireland, but there's one night that's all the boy artists, and he calls it He for She or something. And he asked me would I do it this year in Athy. And Athy is a small town between Kilkenny and Dublin. And so I said, yeah, I'll come over, but I don't know what I'm going to do, you know. So I went over a couple of weeks ago. And I'm shit on the guitar by myself, though I'm just about to embark on a 4-week one-man show in Australia, and I'm trying to learn the proper chords to my own songs. God help him. And so I thought I'd do it in Athy, and I banged out a couple of my old songs, a couple of new ones. But actually I got together with some of the cool guys in the afternoon, and I'd asked the piano player to knock off a couple of them from me. So it was fine. It was great. But I did What's So Funny About Peace of an Understanding. And again, the guys in the band said, you read this out on the Late Late Show, and it really affected us. Why don't you do it again with the crowd? So I did, and I said I want to do this because it's where I'm at.
Yeah. You see, I told them here, I don't need many questions with Bob. I'll just ask him a couple of things and it'll be off. I mean, I usually... I've been thinking of wrapping up these talks with the question: can music change the world? But you can ask that question of a lot of artists in a lot of ways. But when I ask it of you, I know that it can, because your music did have a profound change.
I'm not sure of itself it can change music, no more than pop singers of themselves can alter poverty. But together, music as the unifying thing, and I'm not sure that'll continue, because if you take Live Aid, then it was the realization that it wasn't English that was the lingua franca of the planet, it was pop music. Everyone got this now. This thing that had started 30 years before, in effect, had now kind of ended its orbit of the world, and had captured it with its sense, not necessarily the words, but the sense of rock and roll. I mean, it's not a mistake that Little Richard's Tutti Frutti is considered one of the great lyrics. So wop, bop, a lop, bam, boom. Of course it is, because you understand it in Vladivostok, you understand it in Xinjiang, you understand it in a thigh. It's fuck off, It's shagging. It's a syncopated drum rhythm. It's a howl of rage. It's a declamatory. Here I come, whether you like it or not. I'm black. I'm young. I'm beautiful. I'm gay. Fuck off. I'm coming. And you don't need to understand any of that to get the sense of this. It's such a powerful little medium, this thing. As we advanced to the years, it needed to become more sophisticated. But so at the time you get to Do They Know It's Christmas, or What's So Funny About Peace, Love and Understanding, you need to be kind of almost specific. So with Do They Know It's Christmas, I had to be on point. Here's our Christmas. We give a time of empathy. We understand, time of friendship. Even if we can't stand each other, we sit down to break bread. And there's this other world, nothing. Hold on. Isn't it the point of Christmas that we extend that empathy sort of thing? So it had to be prosaic. But that's not true of rock and roll. It is without language, ultimately. And so that was kind of the intuitive understanding of Live Aid, which worked. So everyone could watch this and get it. And so that worked. 20 years later, though, as you're well aware, when we had moved the lobby of 1.2 billion people that watch Live Aid to being able to, the boys and girls with guitar were able to, in effect, corral the political and economic structures of the world to a pointed, focused end, because we'd worked the system. It wasn't rock and roll that allowed myself or Bono, say, to infiltrate power. Power only works, especially in America, on two aspects: the lobby and money. And if you have a lot of both, you get in. So a lot of money, as we see today, gets you anywhere in into the American system. A lot of votes gets you anywhere into the American muscle, gets you somewhere. So with 1.2 billion people, I was able to start going to see the White House and, Downing Street and the Elysee Palace and the Reichschancellery and all this stuff. I was able to do that, not Reichschancellery, hello, but the German, the Bundeschancellery. So I was able to do that and begin the process of saying, this can change. This really can change. And then work out policy. It wasn't unreasonable. We were very discreet. But it was 20 years of non-stop work. So music didn't do that. Right. Music harnessed the sympathetic mind and focused the intent. And we were able to show through Live Aid that it was possible to change things. Give us money and we will stop as many of these people dying as possible. By Live 8, which everyone's forgotten, which is kind of weird, which was 1,000 times bigger, which had all the new kids, Will Smith, Snoop Dogg, Jay-Z, Beyonce, etc., etc., etc. You could argue from a very obtuse policy point of view of taking the debt, removing the debt, which was meaningless to us and choked every developing country and therefore choked its people. And you could increase aid, as we see this week, most disgracefully, the most powerful country on earth, the strongest man on the planet and the richest man in the world decided to take apart the structures that allow millions of people to live. So at a stroke, those people who require AIDS medicines may now very well die. 5 million in Africa, almost immediately, if their AIDS are withdrawn, and currently it looks like that'll happen. But quite literally, unbelievably, taking the food from a starving or hungry child's mouth. There are 600 million hungry people go to bed tonight. 300 million of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. Elon Musk and Donald Trump have made sure that they go to bed hungry into the foreseeable future and conceivably die of hunger. They've withdrawn all the medicines that their panicked, exhausted mothers, gang raped in Sudan, are forced into famine, 25 million tonight. They've stopped that. So this greed, this terrible narcissism, this vanity of power. So for all the lobbying that we could bring to bear, ultimately you had this destructive, nauseating, uber power that cares for nothing but power itself and wealth. And I don't want to sound like I'm 13 again, but is there some kid out there that can deal with that, take it forward, create a different, newer lobby and force these awful people to do other?
That's a big question. Okay, what a note to what a note to end on. But it's true and it's powerful. And
out of here.
Thank you for coming and speaking.
Okay,
to
guys.
Music, War and Peace.
Cheers.
All right. Well, that was Sir Bob Geldof, and leaving us with something to think about on the Bridge Music, War and Peace podcast.